In the time when the wheel of Dharma turns slowly and the hearts of beings grow heavy with conflict, there is a teaching that comes not as a sword to sever enemies, nor as chains to bind the self, but as the gentle hand of Maitreya, the future Buddha, the Buddha of loving kindness. His presence is not distant. His arrival is not merely a prophecy of some far-off age. Maitreya stirs even now, in the spaces where enmity and love entwine, calling forth the wisdom of the middle path. There is a parable whispered among those who seek his path. It is said that a traveler once journeyed through a land scarred by war. Along the way, he met two figures. One was his enemy, the one who had burned his home and scattered his family. The other was love itself, walking beside them as a silent witness. The traveler's first instinct was to destroy his enemy, to crush him so that the pain in his heart might finally cease. Yet love placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You may strike him down, but know this. When his blood stains your hands, it will mingle with your own suffering, and the wound will never truly close." Confused, the traveler turned away from violence and sought to flee instead. To erase the enemy from his sight and heart, he wandered the forests, climbed the mountains, crossed the rivers, but always the enemy's shadow followed. He realized that the enemy was not merely a person outside him, but a presence within, a knot of hatred, fear, and grief wrapped tightly around his own heart. Exhausted, he collapsed beside a quiet stream. Love knelt beside him again and spoke with the voice of Maitreya. "You cannot kill the enemy without killing part of yourself. You cannot erase him without erasing part of the world. But you can see him. You can see his suffering, his ignorance, his fear, and in seeing him, you will see yourself more clearly. This is not to make him your master, nor to invite his blade again into your home. It is to step beyond the wheel of hatred, to know that his suffering and your suffering are woven from the same thread of samsara." The traveler wept, not for defeat, but because he had glimpsed the truth. The enemy was no longer only his tormentor. The enemy had become his teacher. The fire that had burned his house was also the fire that burned in the enemy's heart. Both were trapped in the same cycle of craving and aversion, both desperate to be free. With this knowing, the traveler did not return to embrace the enemy, nor to surrender his home. He returned to stand firmly in his own truth, guarding his family with strength, but no longer feeding the fire of hate within. When he met his enemy's eyes, he saw not a demon, but a suffering being. He did not lower his defenses, but he also did not sharpen his blade with vengeance. He carried the sword of wisdom in one hand and the lotus of compassion in the other. This is the teaching of Maitreya. To love the enemy is not to let them trample your garden, nor to throw open your gates to harm. It is to walk the middle path, to see that the enemy and the self are bound by the same chains of ignorance. Love is not weakness. It is the courage to stand in truth without letting hatred consume the heart. Maitreya's smile is gentle, but it is not naive. It carries the knowing that some enemies may never change. Some will strike again, but to meet their blows with endless hatred only weaves the net of suffering tighter. To hold love alongside wisdom is to loosen the knots, both in the world and within the self. When you walk this path, you walk with Maitreya already. You do not wait for his coming. You manifest his future in every choice to see clearly, to love fiercely, and to stand unshaken in your own dignity. The enemy may never know this freedom, but you will. And that is how the Bodhisattva transforms the world, not by conquering others, but by liberating the self from the grip of enmity. So, when you meet your enemy on the road, remember, Maitreya walks beside you, not to disarm you, nor to bid you bow, but to remind you, you are free, free to defend without hatred, free to love without surrender, free to see the enemy as he is and still choose to be whole.